Okay, yeah. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is the third, well, good afternoon or good morning for others in different time zones. Thank you for being present in this room. This is the third of our monthly conversation at an NICMCR on ecology. So, the third, this will be Professor Franz Weisen, who is professor at Radboud University, Nijmegen, but also adjunct professor at Universitas Gadjah Mada, teaching at CRCS and ICRS. So welcome, Pak Franz, and also welcome others to this monthly talk, especially to Pak Zakaria, who will be our speaker next month. We'll see again next month, the first Monday of December, with Pak Zakaria as the speaker. So for now, I let Franz to present as usual. Well, I don't know how long you plan to speak, 20-30 minutes, and then the rest we can have discussion until 4 at most. So yeah, please, Pak Franz, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Farzijn, dear friends. Good to see you at this monthly conversation or talk. Well, as the name says already, I'm not going to give a formal lecture. It is really something that I want to share with you, a brainstorm, some initial ideas of something that, well, has my interest. And in fact, it is not my expertise. I'm not in pedagogy or not in education. So I really talk about it as a volunteer in some charities and something that has my interest. Inclusive environment education. I'm going to share the screen with you. What is this? Oh my goodness. Do you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So inclusive environment education. This is a gathering organized by the Netherlands Indonesia Consortium for Muslim-Christian Relations. And in fact, since the very beginning of this consortium, education has been very crucial. The consortium was started by Kerk in Actie, a Dutch funding agency, together with UKDW, and they together they wanted to strengthen the existing collaboration between educational institutes in the Netherlands and in Indonesia. That was in 2011. And at that time, of course, we spoke a lot about extremism, terrorism. There were bomb attacks in the Netherlands, in France, in Indonesia. So it was more or less discussed that the consortium would focus on inclusive religious education as an answer to growing extremism and terrorism. And as some of you know, the consortium is based on the idea that the history and the societal challenges in our two countries are very much related, because we share, whether we like it or not, we share a history of about 350 years together. And many of the debates that are going on in the Netherlands and in Indonesia are shared. I'm not going to explain the whole history of the consortium, but at present the consortium has 3 work groups, one focusing on inclusive education. It's also called Text of Terror. The name itself says enough. We have a work group working on gender issues, and we have a working group on environmental challenges. And interestingly, we see that those topics are addressed. Just like last week, the POCSA Gender had an organized discussion, and it was about gender and ecology. So increasingly, we can see that inclusive education is kind of a bridging topic. However, in this presentation, I will link myself to inclusive education, environment education, and I know that it has to be broadened to gender issues and disabilities. Madi, thank you for this comment. And I try, that is my task for today, but just as brainstorm, so it's work in progress. I see if and how inclusive education and environment education can be bridged. Now, inclusive education, I'm not going to tell the whole story because we all know, and that is not the core of my talk, but Indonesia has had violent clashes, particularly after the Reformasi. A well-known example is, of course, the church burnings and the Maluku crisis. I generalize, but during the Suharto regime, of course, it was an authoritarian regime, controlled the media, and it was all about Pancasila. Now, after the Reformasi, of course, there was a freedom of speech and also freedom for extremist or fundamentalist groups to express themselves. And I think we can say that since then, religious conflicts have been increasing. There are also numerous interfaith initiatives, as we all know, and we have been working for a long time on that, so I'm not going to repeat everything. But during the Maluku crisis, I referred already to that. We had the peace provocateurs, we had the Women for Peace. Also after the natural disasters, a tsunami in Aceh, the Mount Merapi eruption in Yogyakarta, we see that various religious charities smoothly work together. In the circle of the government, of course, we have the Ministry of Religious Affairs, promoting harmony, Pancasila, Islam, Nusantara, and so on. We have a special envoy of the President of the Republic of Indonesia for interfaith and intercivilization dialogue. So there is a lot of initiatives from the government, but also in the non-governmental organizations. We have Intervidii, Protestant organization, Madya, Society for Interreligious Dialogue, Wahid Institute in Nahdlatul Ulama, Marif Institute in Muhammadiyah, and so on and so on. However, despite all those good initiatives, large-scale fieldwork in Indonesia shows that, in general, the contact avoidance in Indonesia is quite high. In various surveys, if people are asked, do you accept a mayor, an inmate, a civil servant, a police officer, a best friend, or a spouse from another religious background, most respondents say no. So that is something that I think is interesting about the Indonesian society. And when we look at inclusive education, we can see that that is an attempt to overcome contact avoidance. But overall, this is a research, among others, by Muhammad Yusuf, we see that overall, the government, but also teachers and students have a preference for mono-religious education. For example, to a statement, religious education should help me to convince myself of the beliefs, values, and rituals of my own religion, gets a high agreement. Whereas statements like religious education should aim to develop my interest and beliefs, my interest in beliefs, values, and rituals in other religions gets a very low agreement. So yeah, what we see overall is that there is a high support for mono-religious education also, of course, because that is the model that the government stimulates. Now, when we talk about inclusive education, we can say that this is an attempt to overcome this trend of contact avoidance and to stimulate interfaith relations based on religious values, shalom, salam, and also to show that when you are open to other faiths, that does not mean that your own faith weakens. Well, I leave it at that because that is not the main topic of my talk. I go to environment education, something that, well, we don't really address in our POCSA, but I hope that we are going to address it in the future. Here again, some general facts. Indonesia is named the second and the third, or the third largest polluter in the world, depending on what and how we measure. Now, I'm not going to repeat all the facts. Rivers such as Ciliwung and Citarum belong to the most polluted rivers in the world. Water contains microplastics, chemicals, metals, antibiotics. Plastic waste is enormous, and so on. Moreover, Indonesia is extremely vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Floods, sinking cities. I mean, you have to remove your capital city to Kalimantan because of this danger. So Indonesia is really very vulnerable to the effects of climate change. There are numerous initiatives to overcome environmental challenges. The government, for example, was the first, the Indonesian government was the first to sign the Kyoto Protocol. It organized the Bali conference. It promised to reduce plastic waste, greenhouse gas, and so on and so on. But here again, when we look at statistics, among others, a survey done by Millman and Harvey, Indonesia has the highest percentage of climate change deniers in the world. More than the United States of America, more than Saudi Arabia. That is also something alarming, at least from my perspective. There are very good examples of environment education in schools. The Green School. We have nature schools. So increasingly, we see environment education implemented in our education, also promoted by the Indonesian Ministry of Environment, that has a policy on environment education since 2014, promoting environment education in 250,000 schools. But here again, faith-based organizations are not in the forefront. They do too little and are too late. In my experience, based on some researches and PhD thesis, among believers, there is a widespread idea that religion is concerned with the afterlife and not with this life. And we can have a discussion about it, but that is what we see in studies. An attempt to overcome this challenge is what is debated as integrated science, balancing religious education and natural sciences, but also theology and technology, as for example in the UINs nowadays is quite common to focus on integrated science. Okay, this was just a summary. My question, can we integrate the two debates? And if yes, how could we go about it? There are various attempts at combining inclusive education and environment education, but most of them, at least those programs of environment education that I know of, start from the idea of balancing humans and nature, seeing them as two different entities. We assume we have nature on one hand, humans on the other. Nature is not human, human are not nature. So we separate the two and we try to balance. I just as think out of the box and as a brainstorm, I think would it not be better to start at the other end and just see humans as part of nature and nature as part of humans. So these are not two entities, but basically this is one. Just destroying nature is also destroying ourselves. And I just go a little bit into the theory. Already in 1890, the American philosopher and psychologist William James went beyond the separation between body and spirit when he talked about the self consists of I and me. I and me are not separated. They are two parts of the self. I am the subjective self. I am the one who thinks, who acts, who experiences. The me is the material self, the social, the spiritual self, my body, my clothes, my house, my family, my friends, my values, my consciousness, all go together. I'm inspired by this theory and elaborating on this dialogical self theory perspective. Some of you who know me better know that I've been working on the dialogical self theory for quite some time. And I see nature as a position in the self or a voice in the self, not outside me, but inside me, a voice in the multi-voice itself. That must be negotiated with, just as other voices in the self, in terms of conflict, compromise, consensus. So nature is part of ourselves. It is also a voice in ourselves, taking into account that that voice sometimes is also not so friendly. It can be harmful. It can be an enemy. Yet I have to deal with that. People would say, Anshu is much better at that than I. So Anshu, please comment. Yeah, but okay, people are, human beings are part of nature, but yeah, humans have spirits. Okay, but if you assume that also nature has a spirit, or that nature is spirited, also that argument doesn't apply. So increasingly it becomes complicated to distinguish, the spirited and the unspirited world, or the material worlds, human beings and the other than human beings and so on. So I try to base environmental education on that starting point, not on harmonizing or balancing them. Now, can that be discussed with children? Of course, I'm interested in small children. It seems all very abstract. I and me, William James, the multi-voice itself, and so on and so on. It seems all quite philosophical. But if you have experience with children, and as a volunteer, I have some talks with children about that. Children have a primal experience of nature. And when I look at studies on it, the dichotomies that we make are learned later in school. So when you talk to children, they really think out of the box. And sometimes they think very creative, and they really have a more primal experience of nature, much more than we. So I think adults can learn from them. And there is a whole group of scholars who talk about philosophy with children, very, very inspiring. And I think that could also be a good inspiration for inclusive environment education. So then I suggest to start from very primal experiences and interpret them from religious concepts. For example, the Khalifa ID and the Imago Dei ID course, very abstract concepts, but I think with small children, you can discuss those issues and also have quite some fun with children about it. Tawhid and Unio Mystica, there are so many concepts that we have in our religious traditions that we can discuss with children, of course, in a very simple and a very concrete way. We can do that in Sunday school. When we talk about children, about Christians, we can do that in TPQ, but preferably together. I know from one example that we asked children two things. We asked children, when we did this experiment, we went to a certain place. We took 10 pictures of nature or human-nature interaction. And we asked children, what is nature? And they also selected pictures where you have trees with human beings. So it was not the wild rainforest or volcanoes, but they selected pictures where you see trees with human beings. So they don't make or seem not to make that distinction. So that would be my starting point for environment education, and from there developing it further. I come to a conclusion. Can inclusive education and environment education be combined? Yes, it can. As it is shown by various organizations that do this already. And these are well documented. Last week, when we had the Poksha gender meeting, there was a lady from Guluk on Maduro Island who had a very nice talk about interfaith environment education. We have the Pesantren in Garut in West Java. We have Franciscan schools documented by Suhadi. Franciscan schools in Jakarta, who have this more dialogical approach, dialogue with religions and natures. And well, just to conclude, as this is also an attempt to bring our two work groups together, I see a role for our consortium here to develop this idea further. And I hope that the two work groups in our consortium, education and ecology, are willing to invest time and money in it, to collaborate with each other to develop inclusive environment education, primarily for small children. That is what I wanted to share with you today. And I give the floor back to Zain.
Yeah, thank you, Franz. Okay, I will open it for anyone who will have, yeah, Anju, please.
I am clapping hand.
Oh, clapping hand. I think you raise your hand.
Here.
Ah, okay. Well, if there's anyone who wants to raise their hand or ask questions, please.
But I may start, Pak Zain.
Sorry?
I may start.
Okay, please. You can clap or raise your hands.
Thank you, Pak Franz. Yeah, that is, I think, to me, a valid concern to pursue. I mean, important to pursue bridging education and environment. First, inclusive education. This is, I think, technical. Let me go that. It is not the main concern of yours, as you said, but since you presented, just comes up in my mind. Inclusive education, the way it has been used, has been a kind of for specific purposes. I learned from our students doing this research on inclusive education on religion, focusing on penghayat kepercayaan in relation to religious education. Inclusive education has been dominantly used for persons with disabilities. So it's a kind of like established term focusing on that. It was hard for us to find religious education that employ religious discourse or religious subject. If they discuss, some writings, there are 2 or 3 journals specifically on that. If they discuss about something in relation to religion, they discuss about inclusive education for persons with disabilities in religious institutions, but nothing like include religious subjects for inclusivity, for inclusion. So I think bringing that up here, it's one of the things to engage inclusive education, which may include religious subjects into it. Now, still in relation to that, mono-religious perspective is like the official by the government. And there have been some work in responding to that. And I think what we are doing at CRCS, ICRS is a kind of response to the official by the government on religious education. So the question for that, I don't see that the mono-religious perspective is going to be replaced. They will use it because that is part of the political bargain or part of the political agenda for whoever get benefits from it. And so I don't see that mono-religious approach in teaching religion would be replaced. And so the best I think we could do is like providing alternatives in addition to that, not to replace, but like additional education for that. Now, what would be my question then is that what would be the expectation in dealing with that? We would still have the official mono-religious approach in teaching religion, and if we want to do something in response to it is improve the interreligious perspective. So what would be like the expectations to pursue or to achieve? Do we expect like Muslim Christians would learn together, for education, for religious education? I'm just still wondering like what you have in mind. Now, my next one, this is the last one, in relation to the environment. I forgot how to say it, how to phrase it. So religious education. So there are 3 topics: education, religious education, and environmental educations. So do you think that what to bridge are the 3? Because like education, if you refer to education, we're not only, what influence Indonesian societies, I think, like other countries, is not only about religious education. We could probably just play roles on that, but I would think that there are some other educations that may influence religiosities among the people. I usually compare like religious education and citizenship educations. Within citizenship education, they also sometimes include religious education in it, at least understanding religious diversities. So could we like broaden the bridging education, religious education, and environmental education? Now, for environmental education, do we expect to have like a formal kinds of education, like talking to, if we want to talk to children's, do we expect to come to schools and provide like a module, like subjects to teach students, or I'm thinking about the consortium roles, or like engage kind of community services where we can, you know, work directly to the communities, which may engage children as well as adults, you know, for that. And I think I have observed the way, I mean, community engagement or community services facilitate like a bridging theories to be implemented, because in communities would be more flexible to think about, you know, what to do for education, what subject to share, because people may, you know, just engage them together. So so formal or informal education engaging the bridging theory. So that's, I think, that what I could draw, Pak Zan, Pak Franz.
Yeah, please, Franz.
Okay, well, thank you, Anshu. First of all, it it's interesting that you bring up the issue of disabilities, because one of the participants, my friend Madi, who is here, who spoke about it to me, and he said that that is the first association that I have. I'm not a member. I'm not a member of the POCSA education, but as far as I know, the POCSA education since its very beginning has been talking about inclusive education, only referring to interfaith education, overcoming the threat of terrorism. I think the official name of the POCSA is text of terror. You know, that was the beginning of the consortium. And I remember that Zain issued or was the special editor of a special issue of the Studies in Interreligious Dialogue, a full issue on inclusive religious education, also focusing on interfaith relationship. So that is the association that I have with the term inclusive religious education. Once again, I'm not a member of that POCSA, and I'm not even an expert on education or religious education. It is pure my interest as a volunteer in some charities. Yet, if you look at the statistical research in Indonesia, that shows a high level of contact avoidance, seeing the other, the stranger, not only as a stranger, but also as a potential enemy. I think for education and for schools, it is important to include that interfaith perspective. How you do it, I don't know. I think there are people here who are more experienced about it. But you ask, what for? Yeah, I think to stimulate respect, tolerance for the other believers, as a way to fight against this trend to separate and to avoid contact. Well, that would also be my next step to the environment education, something that I'm a little bit knowledgeable about. When we talk about respect for the other, as we promote an interfaith education, I think that can also be extended to expect for nature, the respect for nature as part of ourselves. Nature not as different, nature not as outside, but something that is inside me. So that was my attempt. Can we combine, or can we extend respect for the others to respect for nature as a part of ourselves? Whether we should do it, I mean, it is not up to me, but your Indonesian Ministry of Environment Education already in 2014 stimulated that in all schools, to take place in all schools. So that is a policy of your government, and I think it's not well implemented yet. But that is something that should be done, maybe as a separate subject, or included in other subjects, biology or geography or citizenship education. That would be, but in my view, it should be a part of our school curriculum. Also, knowing the huge challenges in Indonesia, the huge challenges, ecological challenges in Indonesia, that should be part of the education of all children. Also in informal, I'm sure you are involved in pesantren. I see eco pesantren doing that. I mentioned some examples, so very good. There are also other faith-based organizations who stimulate environment education. So I think these are good initiatives, but in my view, still exceptions to the rule. Very little. It is not part of our daily consciousness. At least that is my impression. I don't know if I address all your questions, but yeah, my basic idea is simply respect for the other, as we do in inclusive education, can be and must be extended to nature in ourselves, respecting nature as part of ourselves. A bit abstract, but as I said, I think with small children, they don't think in those dichotomies, and they have a more spontaneous primal experience of nature. I'll leave it at that, Anshu.
If I may respond little on that,
Sure.
sense.
Yeah. Okay.
Especially, okay, Pak Frans, thank you. If we especially like carry that idea, nature is part of me, and nature, the way I breathe is through nature, or is nature itself. If we bring that into that idea and use it to engage people surrounding, I have actually observed that people in areas where they have direct encounter with land, nature, or they have the potentials for us, I think, to account for engagement. Do you think that engaging, not looking at like not only the movement by government or non-government engaging like environments, but the people themselves living like farmers, living, we could see a surrounding here. At least they have accounts. I mean, for us to account, because they have direct encounter with nature, and I would assume that if we share ideas and talk to them, I mean, I myself have talked to them, they have a lot of ideas, although not implemented, ideas about how to engage nature. For us to, to bring into discussion by involving them, so taking them as the same player in formulating what education that we could develop, in formulating the way we could, formulate a kind of environmental education that we want to. They are also like the players. Could you think that way too? Like taking the community members as the main player?
Sure. That was not the main focus, but sure. But I'm sure we are together involved in research on human and nature interaction, and we see that among farmers, they respond quite high in terms of exploitative farming. So it is not always the case that people who are close to nature are also nature friendly. There might be people who are close to nature who are nature friendly, but that is not always the case. I was more interested in adults, or we also have those dichotomies. We already have those dichotomies in our head. I was more interested in small children because we know from research that when small children are confronted with this type of experiences, that later on they will show a higher commitment in environmentalism movements. But yeah, Anshu, you know that we talk a lot about it. I think, yeah, in principle, we can learn from people who are closer to nature. But yeah, making the footnote that is not always the case. That people who are close to nature are nature friendly.
Yeah, I am afraid if that not like kind of essentializing knowledge that we have had. My point is that people like who have like a farmers who have some encounters, directly with land, whatever knowledge that they have, like a potential, to talk to, a potential, to discuss, to have discussion, to transform together.
Sure. Whatever we do, so I mean, in the small examples that I give, we have to include the community. So in my ideal situation, but I'm just brainstorming and I don't have a elaborated plan. But I hope that we can facilitate a discussion, moving from small children to their parents engaging the other parents in a community-based type of environment, and including the government. Because what I see, I know very good examples where the RT and the RW has a good system of waste management, are really involved in those issues, but others don't. So I think there is a task for the wider community in it. But I think my hope is that we can have a movement starting from children who make their parents aware, the parents make the other members of the community aware, and they involve the RT and the RW and all the political institutions. Maybe that is romantic, maybe that's ideal, but I think, well, it's done. I know some examples where that happened.
Okay. Malang is raising his hands, but there's also a question on the chat box by Yus. Maybe I'll invite Yus first, if you want to speak, Yus, before Malang, or well, if not, Malang first. Please, Malang.
Thanks, Pak Francis. I would just like explain how Pak Anju talking about the issue like in community. I'm just wondering, have you thought about kind of bring the idea to, if we want to address environment, can we talk about in the category more like religious ethics? Because if we're talking about that into the religious ethic, which is, because that's the, that's the process theology, by Whitehead they use. They're talking about the social ontology of the metaphysics, which is, they're talking about relation between God and the world. So in that sense, that's how we are easy to bring those environment as a part of the religious ethics. So that might be another perspective. That's how we can contribute to the society. We are not against, like Pak Anju talked about, the social structures in Indonesia already see the mono-religious as a platform. That's how identified. But if we use the process theology, we're not against any of the God existence. But at the same time, we talk about how the God relationship with other, which is here is talking about environment. And also on the other hand, through the very ground-up approach, that's maybe we could bring in more like experiential experience, which is like about, I'm just talking about the local community. They might have the initiative how to bring the people to encounter with environment. So that's become the first how the local, either it's the children, it's the youth, or the local people, they get to appreciate the relationship in their daily life with the nature. So those experiential education could be part of how the local communities see that's the local knowledge, they appreciate the natures and the environment, and also that will bring into the dialogue with more top-down, which is we're talking about religious ethics. So that might be another approach that we could see how to bring the environment issue into today. It's already social structure. See, the religion is it's already fixed. So how to bring this into more like add-on ethic issue concern about environment into the society. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, in harmony with what Anshu said, it has to be community-based. I'm not so how can I say, not so optimistic about environmental ethics. Certainly, if you put it in a religious context, because Mas Afnan and Zaimatis, we did the research in Pasuruan. You know, you have nice religious ethics. We have even fatwas formulated by religious leaders. But there's a huge gap between the ethics and the practice. Zain wrote a nice article about this issue. That on the one hand you have the religious ethics and religious teachings on environment. On the other hand, you have the practice, which is quite different for a variety of reasons. And I don't blame people. But we have to face that situation. That there is that gap between, on the one hand, the ethics and beliefs, and on the other hand, our practices, for a variety of reasons.
Okay. Yes, please use if you're ready.
Hello, Denmark.
Hi. That very precisely what I wish to convey, the ethics and the practice. Because we have enough, I mean, like within Islam, it's like we have enough, a lot of theories. We need to love nature. When there's the Armageddon is coming, well, you're busy planting something, keep planting the trees instead of running away to save yourself. So and then again, you mentioned Denmark. I live in Denmark, where nature is part of the upbringing here. Maybe you heard like the parents would just prefer sitting in a restaurant eating while the children sleeping in their stroller lifted outside in a -6 degrees. So that is their way of bringing the children to know the nature, to feel the nature. So back in Indonesia, because I'm very in the decolonizing the thinking, decolonizing the mind. The parents in Indonesia are so caught up sending their babies to the best school that they can learn whatsoever. I mean, they need to learn to math by 4 years old. While here in where I live here, the children, they don't get to learn to write, to read until they at the age of 7, because 0 to 6 is they need to go to nature. So the embodiment of nature is part of our brain. It's so much strong than back in Indonesia. So I'm really curious, how would you envision this putting education in children while decolonizing the thinking that modernity needs, vis-a-vis the children away from the nature, but sending them to educational where they learn to how the math or things like that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I once again, I'm not an expert on it. I know that we have green schools in Indonesia. We have nature schools in Indonesia. But as far as I know, they are really exceptions and very widespread. But this is not very common, and I indeed recognize that parents here send children to schools early and focus on cognitive skills more than other skills. I think more than in Europe, at least from my own country, and as you say, in Denmark. I don't know.
Well,
Maybe there are some Indonesian parents here who have more experience.
well, probably Franz, just an additional idea. When I read Yu's question, how to envision this practically, I was actually also thinking, well, the official name of our Pokja is ecology as a common concern. So that is another way. This is not an alternative, but an additional way of thinking about how inclusivity may include issues related to ecological concern. So that is by saying that the ecological issues are common issues. So we're broadening the scope of inclusive education to also include looking at these common problems. So just
thank you for reminding of that. I forgot it already. That indeed, in the very beginning, it was ecology as a common challenge. So that has the idea of inclusiveness already.
Yeah. Okay, so it's almost 4. 3 minutes to 4. Is there any other comments? If not, we can close it.
Thank you very much, Pak Franz.
Yeah. Okay.
And I hope we can put it on our agenda as Pokja ecology and education.
Yeah. And actually, all Pokja can go together. I mean,
last week we had the gender Pokja who had the same issue, how to include gender issues in environmental issues.
Yes. Okay.
Good.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, to share your ideas, opinions, etc. In this brief conversation. And next month, we will listen to Pa Zakaria Nilo. I still don't know what will your title, Pa Zakaria, but we'll promote that in poster probably in 2 weeks. Yeah,
I'll do that. I'll send you.
Yeah, or probably if you can mention, I mean, if you already have a title for your talk, Pa Zakaria.
No, not yet. I'm still gathering my because okay, I still in the process. Yes.
Okay, well, thank you and see you all next month.
See you. Terima kasih, Pak Franz.
Bye-bye. Sama-sama.
Thank you.
Terima kasih, ibu-ibu, bapak-bapak. Salam.
Sama-sama, Pak. So I stop it now.
Okay, bye-bye. See you
Bye.
tonight, Zain, Anshu. See you tonight.
Okay.
Bye.